to put a little box to get everybody to click on.
Yeah. All right. You know what else I'm going to do? I'm going to have everybody look into the cameras and smile. And then I'm going to print the screen. Okay. And
Oh, no.
John, can you scooch in a little more and have a look? Awesome.
There we go. Yes.
Perfect. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Now, hopefully that's a nice picture, and I'll probably put that one up. So, okay. So first things first, I always try to start with a smudge. Been a tough week for me, so if I need one, maybe you do too. I might have the oldest matchbox on the planet. I think I do. I'm gonna mute you just so I don't yell at you all.
Does it taste okay?
Okay, I just did the yell. You all know that yell. That's why some of these are at the dollar store. They don't go. Hey, thanks, honey. I did, but you're going to be recorded if you want. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I'm staying until I get that back.
Oh, okay, okay.
No, it's a little Darcy.
Hello.
He's shirtless. There you go, babes.
Thanks for telling everyone.
You're welcome.
Our imaginations are flying.
Right?
Oh, it's much better than wearing a Man U shirt.
Oh, Larry says it's better than a Man U shirt. You know who I seen? I was leaving Sobeys, Larry, and I seen a Jeep with a British flag and the Liverpool logo on the side. And I think, I know where you live, because it was right on 17th. I think I know exactly where he lives. I think he's that guy with the Liverpool flag. So
awesome.
Anyway, so I have a smudge going here. So like all of you are more than welcome to smudge. I just want to start off by doing a prayer. I think it starts us off in a good way. So, you know, I'll just kind of clean off my hands and try to breathe here a bit. And I'm going to bring in my ancestors, and that includes your ancestors. I always acknowledge the next generation of youth and the spirits that are yet to come, maybe grandkids. I always acknowledge those that are living right now. So the two-legged, the four-legged, creepy crawlies, those that swim, those that fly, the Mother Earth, the air, the water. You know, this is a time to acknowledge nature and remember our connection to the land. Then the last one I do is always for the unseen world, for things that I don't understand that are bigger than what my little puny human brain can comprehend. And with that, I want to think good thoughts, see good things, say good things, hear good things. Always come from the heart. And I'm going to put a little extra for my high blood pressure. I just want to kind of smudge off any of that negative thoughts from the week or even earlier today, and just be centered here with you all. You know, again, I can't tell you all how much I appreciate you being here. So thank you for joining us today on this hot 33-degree day. So let's start too with our 7 sacred teachings. To cherish knowledge is to know wisdom. To know love is to know peace. To honor all of creation is to have respect. Bravery is the face of foe with integrity. Honesty means righteousness. To be honest with yourself first, in word and in action. Humility is to know that you are a sacred part of the creation, and truth is to know all of these things. Our guidelines, you can pass, you can participate. There's privacy and confidentiality. So right now we're recording, but if at any point in time anybody is uncomfortable or they feel that they don't want to say something recorded, I'll just stop it. Just let me know, and we'll start it when you're ready. I want to start with the land acknowledgement as well. So I want to start by acknowledging that we're recording. We are supposed to be in the Greater Forest Lawn, but we're kind of everywhere, and I'm grateful for that we can do that through Zoom in a COVID-19 time. So I want to acknowledge the land that we're on as Treaty 7. This is the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Gunai, and Bagani of the Confederacy down south of the US and Canadian border are the Blackfeet Nation. The Stoney Nakoda came on board with Treaty 7, and that's the Wesley, Chiniki, and Bearspaw Nations. And then the Dene from the Tsuut'ina. I always acknowledge all First Nations. Métis status and non-status, Inuit as the caretakers of Turtle Island. So with that, I'd like to do that land acknowledgement. LGBTQ2 plus inclusive. So when we do any of our introductions, it's usually a good time to use your pronouns. I use she and her, and we definitely want to make sure our language is inclusive and go from there. We want to respect each other's feelings. No swearing or abusive language. Michelle, I find that as soon as I start swearing, that means that I'm upset and going down a negative road. So I try really hard not to. No cross talking, stay on topic, stay off your phone. Oh yeah. So I'm going to turn off my phone now and flip it over. We don't need that. And oh yeah. So if I just want to offer again that if after we chat here, if you want to, continue this conversation, I'm always available. So, I have my podcast, but you all can get a hold of me, and I'd love to talk to you anytime about anything that you'd like. So with that, yeah, let's just do a check-in. So maybe Crystal, do you want to start us off?
Okay, I'm Crystal. I'm descended from settler colonizers from England, France, Portugal, Scotland, and Romania. I've lived in Calgary for about 10 years now. And I go by she, her, they, them pronouns. I'm a teacher in the public school system in Calgary, specializing in helping children who have different challenges with learning.
Awesome. Thanks, Crystal. Larry, do you want to go next?
Sure. Larry Leach, proud executive director of 12 CSI and good friend of Michelle's for many, many years. Descended from Barbadian Bajan blood, we like to call it, as well as English, Scottish, Irish. I'm a bit mixed up. I'm he, him, and really enjoying, really looking forward to enjoying the discussion of a book written by my son's MP. His very first election, he got to vote for Jody Wilson-Raybould. So, and it was his choice. I encouraged it. Very, very historic that an independent candidate gets in. And so anyway, looking forward to the discussion.
Amazing. Thanks, Larry. Rosemary Dawn, would you like to go next?
Sure. Rosemary Brown, I use she and her pronouns. I'm a white Euro-Canadian settler of basically English, Irish, French, and German descent, born and raised on the territory of the Onondaga Nation in upstate New York. And yeah, now I'm here in Calgary in Blackfoot territory.
Awesome.
I'm Don Ray. I use he and him, and I'm of white settler descent, European descent, English, Welsh, Irish, as far as we know. So, wow.
Awesome. Thank you. Kat, go ahead and feel free to plug your Settler Book Club.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kat. I use she, her, or they, them pronouns. I am an artist who works in a sex shop. I have been living here on Treaty 7 for off and on for about 20 years. I am descended from English and German folks. And I have 1% Jewish in me, I found out with a DNA test. And I run Settlers Book Club, and that is complimentary and based on chapters and chat. And it's looking more at, it's directed more at white people and what white people need to do to educate ourselves about Indigenous issues, and now more Black and people of color issues as well. And it is every fourth Monday of the month. And if y'all want to link, well, everybody else here is in the group anyway, except Larry. So yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. Thank you all. I just wanted to ask you real quick, normally we don't really talk about the previous one, but since a lot of you got to, you know, participate in that and hear Gabrielle Fayette talk about Call to Action 66, I was just wondering if you wanted to debrief it all about that and tell me if you learned anything or if you got to tell anybody about it or anything like that. And maybe we'll start with Crystal.
Yeah, that was the best book club I've been to so far. It was so, like I think I said at the time too, it was so rich, and because it's such a small group too, it felt so special and like intimate. After I did, so I followed Gabby on Twitter and the Assembly of Seven Generations. I went to their website and then I couldn't find, I still want to do this actually, to donate, but I couldn't find how to do it. Like they have, you know, t-shirts and goods that they're selling in a shop. So I didn't know if that's the best way to do it or if there's another way. So I did reach out. I didn't hear back yet, but
Fair.
Yeah, that's still on my mind of like, how can I support that? Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing. So, and I know it wasn't really said, but it was thanks to you that you were able to donate an honorarium. And I definitely wanted to give you huge props for that, a huge thank you. I don't know if she would have come otherwise, but you know, I'm hoping with the Black Lives Matter and, you know, 4 years of after doing this, it's really clear that unless we start giving honorariums and start paying Indigenous people, it's just not fair to have so much emotional labor given for nothing. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Crystal, for doing that.
Honestly, like I felt good that I could even do that little bit that I did, right? Like I think I said at the time, this was a university lecture that people pay thousands of dollars for this kind of knowledge that she was sharing. So like, yeah. But anyway, thanks.
Agreed. Well, and I did put up the link. It is available. So if anybody missed it, that you're like, oh, you should really see this, then don't hesitate to tell them, so that way they can at least witness what was said, and we can go from there. So it looks like Heather's going to be joining us. I'm assuming it's Heather Walker. So hi, Heather. Well, maybe Larry, I just wanted to let you know that Gabrielle came last time and we were able to hear about Call to Action 66 was really important for youth because basically the government screwed her over, and it really sucks because she had such a good roadmap, but it was completely kiboshed by this organization that Roots is affiliated with. And then one of the main guys there, actually there's a whole bunch of drama for me to tell you all about, but I'll get to that after we kind of debrief about it. So remind me and I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Awesome. Rosemary, you were at our last one. How did you like our last one? Yeah.
Oh, I was really impressed by Gabrielle. I call her Gabrielle in my head. And I talked to Dawn about her and the whole issue of her, you know, working on a committee with Carolyn Bennett, doing all that hard work that was rooted in community, right? Which in theory is what the government is supposed to be about with Section 66, and that they had plans, and how in ignoring them and going with that other organization, it just felt like the whole we thing again that we alluded to. But it really struck me, you know, again, as you, not just that it came from the community, but that it was youth you know, we pay a lot of lip service to youth being empowered to take the lead, and yet they were just shoved aside. And she is a woman, which links to, you know, Jody Wilson-Raybould, just shoved aside. And I'm so glad that organization is still going. And so I meant to look it up and also make a contribution, but I haven't done it yet. But you said you couldn't find where to do the contribution, Crystal?
Yeah, I didn't, like, there didn't seem to be like a donate button or something. So I was just trying to
Okay.
find.
Okay,
I just want to do the most effective way so the money goes like
directly to them.
the most money as possible can go directly to, they use it as they want to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, if that means buying merch, I'm happy to buy merch, but I just wanted to check. Yeah.
We all
Let
start
me know
showing
if
up
you
to book
figure
club
it
with our, you know, shirts and masks.
Yeah.
on.
That's right. It's an advertisement.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Rosemary. I appreciate it. Kat.
Yes, I always love having guest speakers come to our book club because I think it's really a more, it's a deeper experience to hear directly from the author. And next time, if you need contributions towards honorariums, just let me know. I'd be happy to chip in what I can. And yeah, what Gabby said was amazing. And I mean, you always hear about how the government screws people over, but to hear it directly from someone and such a vivid experience that she had, I mean, it's just gobsmacking really what happened to her, and shameful. And I'm very happy to see that she's still continuing on with the work that she's doing and saying, you know, excuse my language, but yes, F the government, and I'm just going to keep going and have support of people like us. Hi, Heather.
Hey, Heather, why don't you check in with us and let us know what you think of, like, first, how you're doing, how you're coping with the heat. If there's something new you need to tell us, and then lastly, if there's something you wanted to talk about our last book club. I know we don't normally kind of, you know, focus on the last book club like this one, but I think we can all agree it was pretty exceptional. So.
Yeah, it was absolutely exceptional. It was great. I did spend a week in Edmonton, and you know, when I came back, and my son has air conditioning, so like that was, woo, what a vacation. It was like being in a hotel. And then I came back, I thought, oh, I missed it all. And that's all right. We're good. We're all good here. Kind of does the hair in, but what else can you say? And last month, again, I totally repeat what I heard Rosemary say about last month's guest speaker leading into this month's book. It was just in my mind the whole time, every page turner. And when I read her speech about how thrilled she was, well, we're probably going to go into that later on anyway, so we'll go there later on. But you know, how thrilled she was to be part of Trudeau's cabinet. I was just like, yeah, where do things hit the fan, right? I think I know where they hit the fan. Like, it was such a segue, such a connection. But it was so great. And ditto with the, you know, say pass the hat and we'll figure out how to pass the hat, right? So, yeah.
Right
Yeah,
on.
same for us. We'll give what we can to bring somebody in.
That'd be awesome. You know what? I didn't even reach out to Jody. And there's a piece of me that thinks she may have wanted to come to talk about it. But at the same time, I thought, you know what? Maybe what we'll do is we'll have the book club because we've read the book. And then then I'll reach out to her and I'll tell her, you know, we had all read this book, but there were lots of comments that people wanted to tell you directly if you're comfortable. But I guess I also would encourage everybody to just, you know, don't hesitate to write her and tell her about the book club, tell her about, you know, what your highlights and lowlights of the book were, and that you can tell her about Gabe coming on before and how that helped give a hell of a lens when reading this book specifically. So, so yeah, I guess with that, let's get started. So this book I started to read when I was on my way to Toronto, and you know, I ended up underlining so much of this.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to finish the whole part of it, which I want to do. But I noticed a lot of it was notes on terminology and things like that. So maybe what we'll do is we'll start off by doing another round and just asking people, you know, did you get a chance to read it? And if you have some questions, how about we get into it? And then, you know, I was looking at some of the other book clubs and I was like, man, this one particular book, I swear we could do a chapter a month, I think, and just like devolve of each one of her points here. But obviously we can't do that because it's, you know, there's so much to discuss and so much to read. So yeah, I guess where do you want to start, Crystal? And we'll just let the conversation flow from there.
Yeah, so I did flag a lot of places. One thing that I thought, you know, through her speeches, part of what this book was showing is just she's been consistent over many years with her thinking and fleshing out what she thinks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in terms of before she was in politics to then she was in federal politics, she was in more local politics and then moving up, but her ideas have been pretty similar the whole time, but just getting more fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I highlighted was about recognition. And, you know, we talk a lot about what's reconciliation, what does it mean, how does it even start? And on page 81, she talks about recognition is fundamental to reconciliation. And how is recognition translated and implemented into tangible and real ways? So.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point to bring up because I actually have, so just how you have everything marked, I have dog ears and underlined. I'm like tough on my books. So, and I have that all dog eared as well. You know, there are numerous laws and policies that need to change and new ones be developed. Legal and political reconciliation in furtherance of the nation-to-nation relationship is a national project that requires significant coordination and commitment at the highest level of government. And it's like, well, are we really there? You know? So I can definitely see why she felt like she had to not be a part of this party anymore. I think she's really consistent throughout her whole book as well, that, you know, these are nonpartisan issues. And yet, you know, she had to pick a team in order to move forward. And now today, like, it's historic. Like Larry was saying, it's historic to have an independent elected person in. You know, Louis Riel, he never got to sit in the House of Commons ever, not one time. So this is pretty significant. And I don't know. It's hard for me. I'm so biased on this one because so I guess our Montreal convention was 2013, and that was when she was a co-chair. So we had 3 co-chairs, and at that time she was not an out liberal. But I mean, who co-chairs a liberal convention, right? So it was like I remember going up and down an escalator. I was going up and she was going down, and we just looked at each other, and I was just like, oh, I wish I could talk to you so much. But at that time, a lot of the Treaty 7 chiefs were saying to me on the down low that they were really concerned because she came from a non-numbered treaty that she wouldn't understand. And, you know, I wish this book could have been out then. So it was so clear, like, out of all the worries that you're going to have, this is not one of them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So maybe, Larry, I don't know if you got a chance to read the book at all, but if you wanted to chime in, and then we'll go Heather, Dawn, and Rosemary, and then Kat.
No, have not read the book, but wanted to listen to everybody.
Fair. So thank you for doing that, though, for coming in and being a part of it. And if you want to chime in, because I mean, so I don't know if everyone knows, but Larry Leach did run for school board and has been very politically active, more in the PC time. And so he has a political background in many regards. And, you know, we used to talk politics all the time. And how did you say it? That we're both kind of trying to, you know, heal from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're recovering politicians. Just like Kent Hare says he was a recovering lawyer. Same kind of idea. I mean, you know, obviously you and I have great admiration for Jody and the stand that she took. And one of the things I said to my wife before the election, I said, you know, there might be a little bit of extra money in the house, but let's not commit all of our dollars if I win to spend. I want to be able to stand on principle if I have to. And that was a piece that was really important to me, that I didn't make decisions, and of course I didn't get elected, so I didn't have to have those choices in front of me, but I never wanted to make a political decision because I wanted to keep my job, and so many people do that. And Jody is a reigning example of how you can still keep your job, get elected, even though you gave up the big Solicitor General post over a real ethical piece and something that was really nonpartisan. It's ethics. You're either a hands-off prime minister or you're trying to steer the ship, one or the other, right? So that's my take on Jody.
Awesome. Thanks, Larry.
And for those that weren't here, my son got to vote for her in his very first election. So
Good.
she is his MP.
That's amazing. Thanks, Larry. Heather, do you want to chime in? Did you get a chance to read the book, and how far did you get, and what are some of your first things that you want to talk about?
Well, like I said, coming from the book club, I got the book at the library right away, and especially her lecture to the Australia and our similarities and differences, and just her passion for when that was in 2016 when she was first elected and when she was first appointed, and she's just like, we've got so far to go, but we're on the way, and just her passion came through in all of the words and phrases, and her insight in I'm very scared of moving forward. In actuality, not that I like the Indian Act any more than anyone else, but I'm afraid of people being ripped off, frankly. I'm afraid of people coming in and gouging other people out, and I'm afraid of that. And I mean, the Indian Act isn't good, but if you read the history of the United States indigenous populations, wow, they were given land one year, and the same as our Métis, it was taken away the next, you know, for back taxes or any poor excuse. So, but she's so brilliant. I'm sure what she would do would protect them. So then I'm on this tangent, and you're right about the chapter a month kind of thing, because I'm on this tangent trying to look up this policy that she wrote and all of this stuff, and getting all tied up trying to, because the government doesn't make it easy to read the government stuff. But anyways, it was just really, really, I think her personality must come out on, you know, in her writings. And you hear about these things, I don't know, maybe other people like bigwigs and MPs and bigger than that have writers, right? But she doesn't have a writer, and her personality just comes blasting out there. And I'd like to ask her, yeah, so how's it going? You know, yeah. And what would she, if she could, what would she direct us would be her next step? Like, we have local next steps, right? I'm with the Alliance, and there's a local Indigenous next step, and that they're trying to work with. And so what would be her next step, right? Like, that she would think our energies would be best put toward, besides getting her back in or getting her for MP or something like that. That would be good for sure.
I have two questions for you. One, what is the Alliance? And two, what was it like trying to get a book from the library?
Oh, it came, I must have reserved it a while ago, and they just Yeah, it came almost the day the library opened up for circulation, like within that week, right? It was like one of the first books coming out of the library. The Central Library is pretty much open for business. Like I haven't gone and perused shelves, right? I just, had it, I just email in and they email back that. And then they emailed last week and says, well, nobody else is in line for your book, so we extended it for you. I'm like, oops. Anyway. And then what was the other question?
Oh, you were
The
saying
Alliance.
for the
The Alliance. So 35 churches in the Calgary, churches and or union organizations are part of the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good.
oh,
And
okay.
they have hired staff and they're working within it. So I joined with the Reconciliation/Indigenous Committee, and they already were on a roll to do liaison officers. So like it's, I guess, kind of elder directed. And so that's what the elders want. So then the Alliance was actually very good at pushing for a fair budget and pushing for the Green Line. And they made a huge physical presence at both of those city councils, and feel that they really had an influence on low income bus passes, and they're little things, right? But just influencing the city hall to keep fair and equitable city available to more.
Mhm.
So it's something we can use in the future too. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Rosemary and John?
Well, since I got the date of the book club mixed up, I only started reading it yesterday. So, but I read over 100 pages and then I skipped to the last chapter. And one thing I like about reading speeches is that the points that are really fundamental for her come through, many of them. She just keeps approaching the same issue around recognition of rights, around that need to change policies and legislation, the need to get away from a pattern of court challenges in order to establish rights or negotiations which drag on forever, and for government and First Nations and others to sit down and negotiate that framework. And I was really interested in that concept of what would need to be created to enable First Nations who are really interested in self-government and self-determination to achieve that, to be able to move beyond what she called the post-colonial door in the Indian Act. So I thought she was brilliant at how she put her ideas together and kept emphasizing them. And I thought, boy, I wish you could be prime minister. I really felt that.
Seriously.
And the other thing that really struck me in running to the last chapter, she was kind of repeating stuff from the first, where she talks about, this is where I was born. This is who raised me. These were the traditional roles. This was my traditional role as a woman. And it just, the penny dropped, right? That within her tradition, if white Canadian society would really respect Indigenous ways of being and doing things, Trudeau would have bloody well listened to her. She would have let him, she would have taken his advice. And he didn't. So he had another scandal erupt in his face. And I just have so much respect for her honor, for that. Because again, in terms of the culture, you speak the truth. It has to be the truth.
Loved it. Rosemary, at about 140 pages in is the governance toolkit and building.
Oh,
yeah. So
good.
This is.
I'll keep reading then.
Yeah, that's actually exactly what you were talking about, where you want to see somehow a legal Canadian framework to work within Indigenous governance. She kind of has this toolkit guide as that example. And, I mean, as a party insider, I've heard that both Carolyn and Jody disagreed a lot on a lot of things, and I would
Really?
probably guarantee this is one of them where, you know, I mean, I have yet to hear a really proud nation say, you know, we signed this agreement with the government. The opposite. I've seen the government say, oh yeah, we've totally signed this agreement. Congratulations, so-and-so nation. But I have yet to see the nations that so-called signed on, you know, do anything. And I think you all agree, I've spoke extensively how when you're an oppressed group of people under, you know, with imposed poverty and imposed governance, and you don't really get to have the choices that you want and need and should have, and certainly not respectful of people and their traditions, the nation's traditions, I mean the people's and from those nations. That's where we're still at. And you know, I want to support Carolyn, but I have yet to really see an example where, you know, this is good. This is a good way to deal with it. And I mean, within the book, there were, you know, sections on the sexism that was addressed, as well as the Wet'suwet'en and the Delgamut case was mentioned throughout this, which is like really important for her to address out of all people, because she's not just a lawyer, but she was also the AFN rep for that area.
Right.
And so hearing it from her point of view, I actually made some notes in there about both of those. So I'll try to get into that a little more later. But, you know, I was really emotional reading a lot of this book because, well, for a million reasons, but I'll let Dawn go and then Kat.
Okay, well, I haven't read the book, but I wanted to listen in, so I'll pass on to Kat.
I read most of the book. I did miss the toolkit chapter, and I plan to obviously finish that. But just to echo what other people have said is, yes, I really loved how she set out concrete things that the government can do and that we can do and that we should be doing. It was a bit heartbreaking to read her earlier scandal ideas about the government and Trudeau, and you know how she respected them and praised them, and then you know it's coming, it's coming. So it was a bit sad to read about her optimism and enthusiasm and hope and respect for the government, and then find out later, you know, obviously that didn't happen. And the chapter I think that really struck me was the one, the second or third last one, about rule of law. That really hit me. It's like Canada is not even following our own rule of law, and we've got to do something about that. I searched online to see if any of her speeches were recorded, and sadly none of them were, because it would have been great to actually see her speak the words and feel her emotion and passion. Bit of a bummer, but yeah, maybe one day something will appear online, and that would be super.
Yeah, I know that she's really methodical about her speeches and what she says, and she goes over them quite a bit. I might have learned that from this book, actually, and it's just something that stuck with me. It is really hard reading that because, so just, I think it was today or yesterday, there was a picture of Deepak and I together at Deepak's campaign office. I was door knocking for Cam Stewart, and there was this beautiful Black woman with us named Gigi, and she was having none of that of being with Deepak. She was one of those people that would rip on one side and then the other, right? So I had a hard time keeping up with her, and we even bumped into a couple of drunks, and like they were Black, and she was like telling them like, you better vote, and this is why. And I was just sitting there going, everyone needs to door knock with Gigi, everyone.
Is she, oh, I'm wondering if Gigi, was she in a union, like IATSE or something like that?
I don't know. She was just a really strong woman who knew exactly what she wanted, and she really believed in Cam Stewart at the time, and as did I, obviously. So, you know, we were door knocking together, and that the reason why it came up was because it was also it's been a year now since he passed away. And so like I see it and I'm like, it's so crazy to me. I was so angry at him for losing our Security Council seat at the UN. And it's like, you know, it's not something you can really hold him accountable now that he's dead. And now today there's so much anti-UN sentiment. Yeah, and obviously we didn't get it. Trudeau was working really hard at trying to get that, and then we were denied just recently, actually, that seat. And you know, I always feel it feels really personal to me because this is the riding that we should have had that seat from. We had it until him, you know, but it doesn't matter. And when I say him, I mean more Stephen Harper than I do Deepak, because it was really Stephen Harper that was calling those shots. And you know, it's funny reading this book because there's so much of what she was addressing was literally to Stephen Harper in 2012, you know, in her position as AFN chief. And, you know, I felt all of those things at that time. That was in the height of I Don't Know More. And, you know, we were all becoming very vocal and active locally as well as nationally. And it was just such a beautiful time. And then to have her, you know, saying these things to Stephen Harper that needed to be said. And now I feel like there needs to be that said to Justin Trudeau with a different lens, you know. Oh, where to even start there? So I thought maybe I'd tell you some highlights for me as I go through this book, because, you know, I got really misty-eyed reading a lot of this, you know, when she talks, and it's just as early as the 20th page where she's talking about resiliency. I fully support the UN declaration, and everything is far from perfect in Canada. The courts have not given us what we need, but what I am saying is that we have opportunities and are demonstrating our success. So she really talked a lot about, you know, regardless of Canadian courts, you know, regularly screwing us over, we are so resilient, and we have examples after examples of that. And you know, for me, with 12 Community Safety Initiative, my original position was Indigenous pride, and trying to highlight that. So of course I spoke about resiliency the most, you know, how here we are despite all of these things that wanted us eliminated. Yeah, so 74 and 75, focusing in the UNDRIP is the start, but not the finishing line. You know, by way of conclusion, let me leave you with these final thoughts. Now is the time. The political and legal ducks are aligned. There is a friendly environment, but we need your solutions. As a government, we are not going to impose solutions. With your leadership, we can and will make enormous progress. There's no need to refight battles and have already been won. Limited resources, time, and energy have to be expended on building, not fighting, on creating, not destroying, on empowering, not protest. Pressing social issues must be addressed now, but nations not ready to assume jurisdiction and responsibilities that come with it. And while the federal government has a critical supporting role to play, the hard work is still to be in the community. And I said in the House of Commons during the emergency Attawapiskat debate, only the colonized can actually decolonize. No one else can do that for you. And, you know, back to having Gabby on last time, you know, here was a woman, an example, you know, these three youths who like took that so strongly, that here is the roadmap for the youth. They gave it to the government. So, you know, here Jody is encouraging all of us as Indigenous people to show that leadership and do what we need to do. And some of us took that mantle, and some of us, you know, obviously, and I know it seems little, but to me, having this book club is an example of reconciliation, and having, you know, ongoing conversations with people who, I remember 4 years ago, people were saying, well, there's no place to really have these discussions. So it just was the impetus to really start this book club. So like we all showed that leadership in some way. And now as of today, even the finance minister has resigned from his federal government position, right, as of today. So for those of us who are trying to show that leadership, whether you're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, like the Trudeau government has lost a lot of amazing people in a
Mhm.
short period of time, you know. And then defining the path of reconciliation through Section 35. Yeah, some of this stuff I was actually, you know, it's that bigger definition of reconciliation too, where for
Mhm.
me, you know, when I use the term reconciliation, it's usually in regards to 94 calls to action and specifically Indian
Mhm.
residential school. But the truth is, I would love to have these bigger conversations that Jody's trying to have about reconciliation. And I try to do that through the land acknowledgement, for example. But what I find is that people are so limited in understanding Indigenous Canadian relations, right? So this bigger picture of her idea of reconciliation is
Is really
just
critical.
so missed on so many Canadians. And
Mhm.
it's refreshing to me to talk to or to read through Indigenous people because, you know, I see that bigger picture. But I'm not kidding. I mean, I have people who have followed me for years who still don't understand where to look for resources, despite all of the stuff I share, despite all of
Mhm.
the podcasts, despite all the book clubs. They still are, you know, I don't even know where to start to look for this information. So in a lot of ways, it's a little hurtful, a little insulting.
Mm.
Not going to lie, by people who are supposed to be allies. Um, but you know, the truth is, right now, I'm in a real learning transition because of the Black Lives Matter movement. And even though 4 years ago we founded Voices here, the everything seems to be louder and different and accessible with youth leading in a different way
Mhm.
than it was 4 years ago. And I
Mhm.
think because 4 years ago that conversation got started, now there's more room for today's conversation. So I know
Mhm.
even for me, like, you know, really addressing my anti-Blackness, that a lot of it I didn't know I had, just as a lot of, you know, racists don't recognize their white supremacy embedded in their thinking and daily routine. You know, it's I always think from that colonial settler point of view, but it is so clear that if we can't even address anti-Blackness, how can we even start that conversation of settler Canadian relations, right? So
Mhm.
I've been really inspired by the new activists that are out there because they're
Mhm.
younger. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of you know, early mistakes. And I'm sure Rosemary and there's not a single person here actually who hasn't done some type of activism work in some capacity. So, you know, when you have all that fresh new energy, but you don't really have the experience, those are the mistakes they're making right now. But God bless their heart, we all made them somewhere. So,
And they're learning fast, you know, so
right?
right?
Yeah,
They're learning. It's very exciting. It's very hopeful.
it really
I
is.
found
Yeah.
very hopeful. Yeah. Do you think when COVID-19, when we can all get vaccines and stuff, there would be a way to have Jody Wilson-Raybould come and speak here in Calgary to those larger issues around reconciliation? And maybe, I don't know if we could get some of the churches or unions to put in some money, because I imagine she needs to charge, you know.
I actually, if she's an independent MP, there actually might be some funds in the Parliamentary Bureau. So it's just a matter of putting in the request, actually, more so.
Mm.
I just had Senator Brazeau on my podcast, and it like those are one of those podcasts like I can't even offer him money because of his parliamentary position. I guess in his case, his senator
Oh,
position. So
okay,
um,
right. Okay,
having
good point.
yeah, having Jody come, I'm sure would be so easy to do. And even regardless of COVID, I am 100% positive we could have like a Zoom her in wherever she is.
Okay,
And I hope that,
okay.
especially today with, you know, this new technology, that it would be probably even more preferred post COVID. Because I think COVID's changed us, right? And if our MPs and our senators and such can adapt to not always getting in a plane and flying over
Mhm.
across the country and staying in
Mhm.
hotels and renting cars and can just get on a stupid Zoom. You know, it's better time management, it's cheaper, all of those things, right? And I mean, when we were talking about democratic reform before we broke our promise, these were things that I was talking about. Like, why can't we just have, because every single one of these MPs and MLAs have a room that's like locked, and you could have an easy on air type of, notice saying you're not allowed to come into these rooms if you're, in session, right? Like, if you're in
Mhm.
session, you're in session, and there's no reason to be flying people all across the country to go to Ottawa
Yeah, that's
every
true.
single time when they could be in session in their offices and not have to travel all the time. So, and it would be cheaper for taxpayers. Like, to me, I thought that was such an easy argument to make, because we haven't really updated our parliamentary procedures.
Mhm.
And I mean, even with internet, with like texting, so many people still have fax, for God's sakes. Like, that's how old school a lot of the institutions are still, right? So anyway, but obviously that was a lost cause, because we totally broke our promise on first past of the post. So
Do you think a webinar would be better than Zoom? I don't know enough about the different technologies. Can more people sign up for a webinar than can get involved in a Zoom thing?
well, even Zooms, you can extend that. And I think because of
Okay.
COVID, a lot of the software companies really adapted, pivoted is
Mhm.
the new term, right? To update their security and update their, depending on how much you pay, depends on how many people you can have in session. So like the new organization that I work for, Chaos, they have Zoom events, and like they have over hundreds of people on the Zoom. So if you pay
Okay, good.
yeah, the deluxe or whatever, then you could do that. But the other part is too, is that, especially if you're going to bring her in through a church or something, there's no reason why you can't do both, like a part in session as well as through Zoom. So, you could have like 4 churches that are broadcasting, and you have, different folks in their different seats and socially distancing, but all on the same screen, so
Mm.
we can really adapt and make some new changes. But like, it's really hard. I was listening to CBC, and they even had like teachers are having a hard time adapting
Um,
to Zoom,
yeah.
and to lesson curriculums on Zoom.
Mm.
Somebody made the rule, oh, no PJs allowed, and they're like, what are you going to do, send us home? Like, what is the consequence to that, right? So
Right.
so like we're just in a different time where, obviously
Yeah.
a lot of teachers still want to exert their control over the students, but at the same time, it's not the same atmosphere as it was before.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because I just think, I'm basically building on what you were saying, that for most of us, we don't think about reconciliation at the level she is. And I think we need to really spread that understanding and that framework, right?
Well, I would
Among
love
people.
that. I feel like I do in my podcast and my book club, but no shoes, no shirt, no Zooming from Larry. That it's just that bigger picture that there's no call to action telling people they have to do a land acknowledgement. But to me,
Mhm.
it's just such a fundamental piece that how can you
Mhm.
be talking about Indigenous issues in any capacity and not acknowledge the stolen land that you're on to begin with?
Mhm.
Like, how
Mhm.
can you even start without doing that? So, and that's that bigger picture of what is true reconciliation. Like, I think her and I have the same belief system that we can, as Canadians who supposedly stand for human rights, have, equality and human rights for all in this country. But under the current legislation, we cannot. And actually, Heather, I think you were not here yet for this conversation, but I was saying there's a man that's in Saskatchewan and Regina in teepee right in front of the legislature, and he's like trying to demand the money be reinstated for suicide prevention that the
Mhm.
Saskatchewan government just cut. And like, they are being bullied relentlessly by bylaw and by police. And their newest one, despite Saskatchewan having restrictions for COVID of you're allowed to gather in a group of 150, they're trying to shut down his TP, saying, well, it's a public endangerment with the amount of people that come in to and from the teepee, even though they all wear masks and they have proper protocols. But, you know, nobody else would possibly be treated this way unless you're native, right? Native while existing. So, you know, and it's back to Jody's point too, that, you know, the rule of law really isn't followed. And, you know, I think the Wet'suwet'en right now with the Delgamuuk case is such a prime example of that, where we pick and choose what rule of law that we use, right? You know, Edmonton, you're not going to believe this story. Edmonton now has 3 tanks.
How many does Calgary have? We have at
Doesn't
least.
matter. Los Angeles has 1. What does Edmonton need
We
3
have a
tanks
tank.
for when we have tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary of, you know, Amber Turco's like murder? You know, like, we have how many missing and murdered Indigenous women here in Alberta that can never get the funding and proper police investigation, or worse, they're racist jerks that mess up our investigations. But we can afford money for 3 tanks. That's
Tanks. Oh, God.
Disgusting.
Right.
And yeah, and I think that not to downplay any of the horrible things that Kenny's implemented in Alberta about gatherings and having to, you know, and being able or unable to gather anymore in protest. I'm pretty sure Rosemary would remember how difficult it was for us to ever pull anything off with Labor Council, et cetera, and any of our coalitions and women's and our Take Back the Night parades and all of this stuff, and having to apply for this and pay for that. And we had to put up $1 million. They tried to stop us from Take Back the Night because they wanted $1 million bond and all this other BS. So I just kind of like when Kenny rewrote it again, you know, it was just kind of like water off my back, because it's never been purely legal. People think, oh, I have this right. No, you don't, not till you try to implement it. And rights are meant to be worn and used, right? You have to exercise your rights as much as you have to exercise your heart, because you don't. Anyways, meet you Wednesday at noon at the War Room.
No, I appreciate that. I know most people here are either with public service in some capacity, and the Kenny government has been really hard. And, you know, for us, like Bill 1 being a direct attack on our ability to, you know, exert our rights. And it's back to this issue of recognition that Jody is trying to emphasize so well through this entire book. And some other points I wanted to talk about. So this is defining the path of reconciliation through Section 35. There are numerous laws and policies that need to change and new ones development. Oh, I think I said this one already, didn't I? Legal and political reconciliation. Yeah, I know I said this one. And the next page, law schools and bars have vital roles to play. We need systemically built understanding about Indigenous laws, how they operate, how they fit into the constitutional fabric of Canada, and how their application is part of the work of reconciliation. And this was part of the reason why, one, I felt comfortable running for David Kahn. He's an Indigenous constitutional lawyer, right? So he may not necessarily agree 100% with Jody Wilson-Raybould, but at least he has a leg to stand on to talk about these issues, as opposed to the yahoos that got elected. You know, so here we are talking about constitutional fabric. Well, we have people in Ottawa who are obviously really reluctant to do any of that work. You know, the justice calls to action alone, let alone just that bigger picture, that if we're going to really talk about, you know, human rights and equality, then there needs to be a dramatic shift in how we write the law. And then once it's written, of course, the next step would be back to the tank issue of trying to get, you know, police more up to snuff on what equality for Indigenous people look like, because their whole existence was to eradicate and eliminate and relocate Indigenous people. So, we have to radically shift not just the laws, but the justice atmosphere in general, right? So that was them. Sorry, go ahead, Heather.
No, that's fine. I don't want to cut you off, but my admiration for Jody is immense because of her ability to somehow make it through law school, which is, i.e., reading and writing and reiterating the law of the land as it is implemented, and yet come out the other side of law school still holding her own persona and holding her own strength and holding her own knowledge and being able to have lived through that experience, because that is exactly what law school is to wipe, it's our law school. There's nothing indigenous in there, and as she mentions, it needs to be fixed. Yet another thing that needs to be fixed, but for her to make it through law school and still hold her power is just it's a really amazing feat, because she would have had to reiterate everything they wanted to hear in order to get that, but not lose her persona somehow doing it, right? So it would be a real feat.
I think, though, that maybe there's a misconception, or maybe how I view the world is this, though, is that, no offense, but Canadian colonial education is so low bar, it's ridiculous. So, like, for someone like myself, I have to know Indigenous law, I have to know the Indian Act, I have to know municipal, federal, provincial law, I have to know bylaw, whereas the average Canadian can just walk around in ignorant bliss about any of the things that I talked about. So, like, for example, my auntie is a lawyer, and Derek Nippenak is a lawyer, and Justice Sinclair is a lawyer. And, regardless of how awful the Canadian education system is, which I think is awful from every start to the end of it, here we have Indigenous people who can finish going through it. And I mean, Jody comes from a really privileged background, so she actually got support to go through this system, as opposed to average Joe not necessarily getting that. Like, even it'd be more of a thing for my auntie, for example, because she doesn't come from the hereditary chief lineage, and having that community support. Like, our community is quite decimated in many ways, and with what she was tackling in law school was what I was tackling in my life. It was a really awful time in our life, actually. And yet she still went through that schooling and was able to go through. But I mean, every lawyer that I know that is Indigenous is working hard for their community, in their community. Like, I don't know a lot of Indigenous lawyers that are, doing their own thing outside of helping their community. I just don't. Like, even Lisa Abbott, she is pretty much in the system, but at the same time, she's still advocating for Indigenous people through that system. Like, there's a lot of folks in Saskatoon that she's working with, right? And actually, and if you talk about that, losing your identity, I mean, Canada doesn't want you to ever have an identity from the start, but she not only, was given that from the start. Like, not all Indigenous people are. Like, for a lot of us, we have to go through our Red Road journey blind after aging out of a foster care or an adoption system, something like that, right? So, and she never had that. She, from the start, she knew who her mom and dad was, she had her community, she was guided, she had principled family helping her through. So to me, like, the Canadian system, and I tell students all the time who are dealing with extreme racism, whether in the public education system or through post-secondary education, you just got to tell them what they want. And then at a certain point, you will be able to get your stupid piece of paper that you paid $30,000 for. And then once you have that piece of paper, then you can just be you. And
yeah, well, that's exactly it, though. That can take a lot out of a person, right? To tell them what they want. But she would be the first generation, I'm assuming, because even when I went to see Douglas Cardinal, he couldn't study architecture in Canada. He wasn't allowed. It was illegal. You had to assimilate to go to university, period. The end. You had to give up status to go to university.
Yeah, I know, but I guess what I'm trying to say to you, Heather, is that there's a misunderstanding in what that means, though, too. being enfranchised legally is one thing, but being enfranchised in your head is a totally different conversation.
Yeah, well, yeah, both. Yeah, right. Absolutely. And so to hold on to what's in your head, or to hold on to what's in your heart or your soul as you read all this stuff. And I couldn't do it anyway. And my sister was a lawyer, and I'm like, where did that come from? Anyway, yeah.
I felt that she was challenging Indigenous lawyers, the Indigenous bar, as she called it, to also, in their cases, start thinking and operating out of that broader framework of reconciliation. And I think she was also challenging local leaders to more seriously engage in, to the extent possible, given all the restrictions and colonialism, community development, so that communities were ready to move beyond the Indian Act. It's very complex.
It is complex, but you know, this is a daughter of a chief. So she was raised with that knowledge of, you know, that bigger picture of governance of community.
Exactly.
Right? But not
exactly.
all lawyers are raised that way. I mean, if you're adopted out because of the 60 scoop, then, you know, you're not given those teachings from the beginning.
Yeah, when I say she challenged, she wasn't being negative. She's just saying this is our responsibility, you know.
And then you're up against, you know, people like in Treaty 7 that say, watch out, she could be bad news because, you know, and why are they saying that? Is it how much of that is to hold their own power? You know, some people are vested in status quo, and they're there to hold.
Oh, that's
it,
for sure.
You know, that's absolutely for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording for a second.